everybody, it's Stewart Swerdlow for Expansions.com, and this is our weekly news podcast for the first week of June 2015. And some of you may notice that I'm sitting here alone because my partner, my cohort, is away in Italy and will be back next week. And she is doing a lot of investigations about the Waldensians and the true history up in the Alpine region of Italy, where it borders France and Switzerland. And she's already come up with some very interesting information, which I'm sure she will share with you next week. And so, here in Michigan, I think we had summer last week. It was on a Thursday, and now that's gone. And so now we're back to stormy weather. But now to the news. And I have not too much for you today, because it's been so busy taking care of hundreds and hundreds of emails every day on my own, and taking care of the comments and the Q&As and everything else. And it gave me a much greater appreciation for what Janet does when I'm away. Of course, she is a little bit of a better cook than I am, so maybe that's a little different for her. Let's talk about President Obama, because as we know, this is his last term in office, and everybody in the world has now said they're running for president. In fact, I'm thinking of announcing this summer that I'll be running for president in 2016. Of course, it may not be of the United States, but some other smaller country that would need me. But President Obama actually told the media a very strange, odd claim. He said, and I quote, that he is the closest thing to a Jew that has ever sat in the office. Now, the Obama advisor David Axelrod revealed that this statement was made for Israeli television, saying that the president also said it hurts for people to say that I am anti-Israel, or even worse, anti-Semitic. Well, that's interesting. So now the president says he's a Jew, and other people said he's a Muslim, and he's a Christian. He just has something for everybody, doesn't he? Kind of really weird and out there. And speaking of it out there, let's go to Pluto. As you know, Pluto was the furthest planet in our solar system before it was declassified as a planet a couple of years ago, and they made it a Kuiper Belt object, and then they made it a subplanet, and they come up with every kind of category you can imagine. It's a very small world. But, they said, Pluto's moons are even stranger, because they said, and they're calling it the Pluto system, consists of 4 tiny satellites, and the names are Nix, Hydra, Kerberos, and Styx. Now that's interesting, because remember, the Egyptians had the river Styx as what you cross to get to where the dead people live. Now it's interesting, it's like a little mini solar system, isn't it, out there? And they're even saying that it's a binary planet, which consists of Pluto and its largest moon, Charon, which is only 750 miles across. But it's half as wide as the planet Pluto, which in this news they're calling a dwarf planet. Now here's my question. How could a dwarf planet have a moon called Charon, which is half its size, plus 4 other satellites? Such a small little world did not have the gravitational pull to create the environment for that kind of thing. But it gets even stranger in the article, because the author of the SETI, or Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in Mountain View, California, said, and I quote, "It's a very strange place to live in if you're orbiting a binary planet." So who's living there? And he goes on to say that Nix and Hydra are chaotic rather than having a synchronous rotation, meaning they don't always keep the same side facing Pluto and Charon. And he goes on to say, if you lived on Nix, you would not know if the sun is coming up tomorrow. It is that extreme. So here they're calling Pluto a mini solar system, a binary system, a dwarf planet, and has all these satellites which has no possibility of attracting with its magnetic pole or gravitational pull. So to me it seems like the whole thing is a bit artificial and is part of the Kuiper Belt system, and that's what I've been telling you about for many, many years. So we'll get more information on that and maybe report on that at the October conference. Now back to Earth. Those of you on the West Coast, pay attention. 7 earthquakes have struck off the coast of Oregon within a 24-hour period, the largest being almost 6 points on the Richter scale. Scientists said that this is from the Blanco fracture zone, which has more frequent earthquakes, but the more violent earthquakes come from the nearby Cascadia subduction zone, which is closer to the coast. And so it is believed that there are many undersea volcanoes going off near the coast of Oregon, and actually the Oregon legislature is considering to fund $337 million to renovate the state capitol building for seismic damage. So lots of activity on the West Coast. Interesting science news, because researchers at the Massachusetts General Hospital are growing artificial limbs, or developing artificial lab-grown limbs, and they tested this by growing a forelimb for a rat with functioning vascular and muscular tissue, and they said this could be applied to primates, meaning also humans, to replace limbs for transplantation, damage from accidents, etc. like that. These limbs that they're growing contain muscle, bone, cartilage, blood vessels, tendons, ligaments, and nerves. But the interesting thing is they're calling this supporting structure a matrix, which, as you know, is a programming word. They said that they took living cells from a donor organ, stripped them with detergent solution, then repopulated the remaining matrix with progenitor cells, those cells that grow other cells, appropriate to the specific organ, so that they can grow not only limbs but organs. Actually, they've learned to open up the blocked DNA signals that can rejuvenate both limbs and organs. And if you may recall, I have talked about this many years ago. It was maybe 20 years ago that I met a doctor in Texas who was able to regrow fingertips with a silver solution that he would apply to the damaged finger, that if you had a tip of your finger chopped off, and he would apply it and it would grow back and look like nothing ever happened. So maybe they took some of his work and now you can grow an entire limb. Very interesting. Now, some of you know I have been talking about so-called global warming or climate change for many years. But this week, a foot of snow hit part of Australia, and the country has the lowest temperatures for the last 40 years. Parts of New South Wales and Australia have been buried under a foot or 30 centimeters of snow on the first day of winter, because of course there's winter there now, summer here. Temperatures dropped to -9 Celsius, and Melbourne had its coldest day in 40 years. Well, it sounds like global warming to me. And in fact, in Sydney, it got as low as 6 degrees Celsius, where their normal is 14 to 16 degrees. It's the coldest morning there also in 40 years, and parts of Victoria, which is a state in Australia, received 20 centimeters of snow. In fact, they said the situation is so extreme that 1 in 10 Australians have had to move their families into a warmer part of the house to sleep, even into one room, to beat the chill, because houses in Australia are not built for this kind of weather, and they don't have the insulation or the heating to go along with it. Now, let's move to the Middle East. You know that I've been talking to you about the secret agreements between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors. And here we have confirmation that since the beginning of 2014, representatives from Israel and Saudi Arabia have had 5 secret meetings to discuss their common enemy, which is Iran. Most people think that all Muslim countries are unified, and they are not. Of course, Iran is not an Arab country, it's Persian, and the Persians and the Arabs have always been at odds with each other. Now, the interesting thing is that this information came out of covert diplomacy at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, which you know is a very high-level Illuminati group. And the Israelis and the Saudi Arabians have a common interest in thwarting Iran. And they said Iran is trying to take over the Middle East and it must be stopped. And there's greater Arab unity and a regional military force which is in the process of helping to create an independent Kurdistan for the Kurdish people, made up of territory now belonging to Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. And I've reported to you before that the Israelis have secretly been helping the Kurdish people form their own country, and there actually is an Israeli base in Kurdish territory in northern Iraq, which is not very well known. But it gets even more interesting because over the last 17 months, there have been secret meetings between the Israelis and the Arab countries in India, Italy, and Czech Republic. And according to one Israeli general, he said, "We discovered we have the same problems and the same challenges and some of the same answers." And that both sides had discussed political and economic ways to help solve the problem with Iran and other things. What also isn't known is that Israel also has quiet relationships with the Gulf Arab states that go back to the 1990s and the Oslo peace process. For example, countries like Qatar are allowing Israel to open trade missions, and that there, now this is interesting, an Israeli intelligence presence in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates. Now, it is also felt that the Arabs and the Israelis could advance their interests in Washington against Iran, and it also stated that the Gulf Arabs believe in Israel's role because of their perception of Israel's close relationship with the U.S., but also because they feel they can count on Israel against Iran. That's very, very unusual. And so they're all worried about President Obama and his peace efforts with Iran, which they think are actually helping Iran get bolder and do more things. And Iran actually helped create the conditions for a Saudi-Israeli alliance against it. And on a side note, I recently had information that stated, that showed an Israeli rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi in Jerusalem, who did more studies of the Bible code, and he found a code linking the name Obama parallel with the word for evil. And according to this, you all know about my Shemitah work, this rabbi also stated that in the Bible code, in the Shemitah year of this 2015, an asteroid would come somewhere close to the Earth, maybe even striking the Earth, somewhere after this Yom Kippur holiday for the Jews, which is in September 2015. So something we'll keep an eye on, and we'll report on more as we get information. Now, I want to remind you that in the third week of this month of June, I will have my webinar on Father, Son, S-U-N, and Father, Son, S-O-N, which is a complementary webinar to the Mother Earth, Birth Mother, Earth Mother that we did in May. So you should watch that first before you come on to the Father, Son. August will be my radionics seminar here in Michigan, and then in August to September, I will have my, actually through October and November, I will be in Europe and the Middle East, and all those dates, and some of the conferences, actually the consultations in Poland and Britain are already booking up already. Then we have our October conference with Dr. Osmanagic and Mary Sutherland, great researchers who will be here speaking to you in person. And then in November, actually end of October and November, I will be doing a special seminar in Singapore at the Sanchaya Resort on an island right off the coast of Singapore. So look for that information to be up somewhere around July. It'll be very fascinating, and then I go on to Bali and other places. And of course, January 2016 is our week-long class. People are already signing up for it. It's not open to a lot of people. So if you're interested, please contact customer support at expansions.com and get yourself reserved for that. And then shortly after that, I'll be on an African tour, and that will be discussed more towards the end of this year. So that's all I have for you today. I know it's rather short, but again, my other half is traveling, and I'm really looking forward to having her back, and maybe, I don't know if we'll be able to film her reaction to my rearrangement of the kitchen and other parts of the house, but I'm sure she'll be very surprised. And so until next time, this is Stewart Swerdlow for Expansions.com.